Thank you so much for staying with us. People, politics and power. And we are looking at tertiary education in Nigeria. And of course, the challenges that lie ahead of the incoming administration. The education system or the education sector generally in Nigeria is said to be in decay. Now, if that is the case, what exactly is the problem with Nigeria's education, and especially so in the tertiary education? Well, joining us at this point in time is the National President of Colleges of Education Academic Staff Union, COEASU. He is Dr. NUHU Ogirima. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We also expect to join us in the course of the programming the Secretary of the Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions, Mr. Peters at DME. We hope that he is able to join us on the program. But of course, from the beginning, let's tell you that you are going to be part of the program today. That is, you will be joining us on our phone lines to discuss Nigeria's education system and the rot, the decay, and the challenges that are very abundant in that sector. The phone lines will be on your screen very shortly, and of course, you can make your contributions because it is an issue that touches all of us. Dr. Ogirima, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask this question. What is the problem with Nigeria's education?
Let me begin this way. It's been identified that our education as fortune has been declining tremendously. And even from your introductory, it's very clear that we're faced with a lot of challenges. And these challenges are not insurmountable. What I think essentially the bane of our educational development is the willpower, because lots of discussions have been had, conferences, workshops on the part of the academia. And besides, government in itself has also recognized the fact that there is a problem in education. And you will recall that the current administration, when they came on board, actually called for a retreat, a ministerial retreat that was declared open by Mr. President himself at the State House. That was in November of 2017. At that retreat, there was a document launched. And that document, I dare say, is somewhat comprehensive because it assessed all the problems bedeviling education, not just tertiary, but the basic and the post-basic levels of education of our country. But incidentally, like I said, the willpower has not been manifested in the form of implementation of the recommendations of that retreat.
So
What
exactly do you mean when you talk about the lack of willpower?
The lack of willpower has to do with the determination of those at the corridors of power, those in power and at the corridors of power, to implementing or towards implementing recommendations. The problems have been identified, and then what it's presumed to be the solutions proffered, but the implementation is nowhere to be seen. And that is why we have
those recommendations that you speak of. There are those who will argue that they may not be adequate enough. Do you consider them adequate? Do you consider them far-reaching enough to addressing the key issues in the sector?
Okay, in the context, let me put it this way. In the context of what this current administration sought to do, no. Because, like I said, the academia itself had series of conferences and workshops towards addressing headlong the problems bedeviling education, even before this government came into power. And I recall that the Academic Staff Union of Universities, in conjunction with sister unions in the university, organized a robust discussion on it. And that was in 2013. we were also, those of us in other systems, in other subsectors, like the College of Education where I lecture, and the polytechnics were invited, and we made our own contribution. It was a one-week thing. Then there's a report on it. Then when this admission came on board, they also saw the need to organize a retreat, the one I mentioned, and they did their own. But to what extent have they taken cognizance of the recommendations of the ASU-led discussion? And to the best of my knowledge, no. There was no recourse to what ASU did. And what ASU did was essentially an academia contribution towards ameliorating the challenges of the education that have lingered for decades unaddressed, unattended by successive governments. And that is why I was at the ministerial retreat of November at the State House. And I dare say that to a certain extent, the document that we have was supposed to be strategically implemented between 2016 and then 2019, this year, even though it was the retreat eventually came on board in 2017. But even at that, the recommendations that were so made after a year after even the proposal was on ground, none of them has seen the light of day. But I dare say, like I said, some of those recommendations were far-reaching, but they were not comprehensive enough. And that's why I said there should have also been a recourse to what the entire academia did, sponsored by the Academic Staff Union of Universities.
Let's try and go into some of those recommendations that you talk about. What are the key recommendations that were made, that was thought, if implemented, would move the sector, move the educational system from where it is now to a higher ground?
I can quickly recall, besides the communique that was for the public, I can quickly recall that in the document that was launched, the Ministerial Strategic Plan for 2016 through 2019, there are two recommendations that have not found themselves in the document of government. One, the recognition that agreements in tertiary institutions are key. The implementation of agreements in tertiary institutions are key towards addressing the challenges of that subsector, of the tertiary education sector. And the second aspect of it that I can recall now in that document is the need to have in place a teacher salary scale to address the welfare of teachers. And this is not just for tertiary institutions, but for the entire teachers at all the levels, the basic education level, the post-basic, that is secondary education level, and the tertiary. As I speak, we're still grappling with even getting our agreements implemented. You will recall that late last year, we had cause to embark on industrial action. We had to do that as a last resort.
That's the colleges of education.
Not only the college of education, the entire unions, the entire unions of the tertiary education subsector. But as I speak with you, most of those recommendations, most of those resolutions that have been had, we ask ourselves again, to what extent have
they were captured in agreements? In
agreements. ASU had its own memorandum of action. We had our own resolutions. Then our polytechnic counterpart had their own memorandum of action. But as I speak with you, it's very questionable the extent of the implementation on the side of government.
Mm. But those are actually agreements that pertain to the welfare of staff of
not at all
of these educational institutions.
You see, not at all.
Let's look at the bigger picture, the broader picture of the issues that are bedeviling education in Nigeria. And there's always the talk of poor budgetary allocation, the absence of necessary infrastructure. There is the absence of even the manpower to drive the system.
That is it. That's what we look at when we look at the whole documents that we have at the moment, coupled with the course of the agitation, the various agitation that's been that Nigerians have witnessed in all the tertiary education systems, they all bog down to the basic issue of access to education, the basic issue of funding, then the issue of infrastructure is also related to funding, then the issue of manpower. If we take the issue of funding, and what do we mean when we say funding? We're talking about the entire commitment of government to the system itself. You see, when we relatively, in comparison with what obtains in other worlds, what the funding formula that Nigeria uses today, government's intervention in form of the TED fund, and then government's responsibility of emoluments and all that, is something that is commendable in comparison with what we have in Europe and America, where the student intake, the enrollment, dictates the funding. But to what extent had government actually kept this? Again, it's not pleasant. It's not commendable. And that is why we have the kind of infrastructures we have now that are not even in tune. The infrastructure is not even in tune with modernity, with the dynamic world that we find ourselves in. Our contemporary world is such that those of us, our colleagues that have been fortunate to have their graduate overseas, their doctoral and all that, will tell you that the manner of the nature of our infrastructure today is not in tune with what obtains out there. And some of us have seen it. To what extent has government committed itself to it? And that is what brought about the issue of the needs assessment. Recall that since it was conducted in universities, the quantum of 1.2 trillion was required. That of the colleges and the polytechnics over about another 2 trillion. The two combined. So putting the funding needs to about 3 trillion. But government in our own case and that of the polytechnics returned the report to us in November 2017 for a review. They said there has to be a review considering the age of the report. Okay. That review was done downwards. All right, but government still has not committed itself to it.
Okay, Dr. Ogirima, I will have to interrupt you there because we already have callers on the line who want to contribute to this issue, to broaden our perspective to these issues. We have Mayowa on the line from Kogi State. Hello, Mayowa. Hello? Is Mayowa there? All right, we hope that Mayowa gets back on the line quickly.
So the other issue I was trying to mention is the issue of access. Again, this is relating to infrastructure. You recall that JAM conducts its examination annually, and we have about 2 million. The last exercise, about 1.8 million. The carrying capacity of the universities is just about 1/3 of it. Or broadly, I mean, the highest estimation I can give it's about 800. The remaining 1 million are left. Polytechnics and colleges who have their own. What happens to the about 300,000 other Nigerian youths that are craving tertiary education?
Is the issue of access not linked with the state of the institutions themselves?
That is one aspect of it. The state of institution with regards to what? With regards to infrastructure.
All right, we'll
because
come back to that.
Because the carrying capacity is low.
Yes. Peter is on the line now, and Peter is calling from Lagos. Hello, Peter. Hello, Peter. Peter, yes, can you hear us? Please go ahead, make your contribution. Hello, Peter.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, my contribution to what is going on here, sir.
Peter, you will need to do us a favor. Please tune down the volume of your TV set before you speak with us. Please tune down the volume of the TV set. It's echoing. It's re-echoing back here, and we can't hear you.
I'm doing that now.
Okay, please go ahead.
I'm doing that now. Please, may I ask the experts in being on board, Are there extra training in Nigeria?
Go on.
They are not. The educationists, are there extra training in Nigeria?
Well, ask your question, and then my guest will provide you with those answers.
My question is, this is the fact of my question is, if they are training in Nigeria, they should know the right thing to say. If they are not trained in Nigeria, they are not supposed to be on it.
But do they need to be trained in Nigeria before they know what is right for the education sector in Nigeria?
Because if they are not trained in Nigeria, they don't know what is happening here. We are expert trained here in Nigeria. We know what is going on. If anybody tries to pass off.
Okay, okay, Peter, what is your perspective to the challenges in the tertiary education sector in Nigeria?
I have like 5 questions to ask them, sir.
Please go ahead and ask those 5 questions.
My first question, this first question is just that. Hello, sir.
We are with you, Peter. Hello, Peter, are you still there? Well, we seem to have lost that call from Peter in Lagos. Peter, if you can get back to us. But Peter has asked a question. He says, the experts in the education sector, are they trained in Nigeria? If they are trained in Nigeria, do they understand the dynamics, the issues, the challenges that are very prevalent in the education sector today?
In the context of the struggle towards addressing the challenges of education, like I said, lots of discussions have been had. And like I said, in the academia, organized by those of us in the academics. The university lecturers, ASU itself, spearheaded that. That's what. On the side of government, the experts that were called to address the challenges included, in fact, the main man was Professor Kebukola. And Professor Kebukola,
who was the Executive Secretary of the National
at one time.
He's
a scholar of international repute. So there's a lot of professors there, some of them based in Nigeria, some outside. And we will not be talking about what do you call it now?
In any case, the educational standards are universal.
It is. That's where I was going. We'll not be talking about localizing training in our attempt to assess contributors when we have identified problems. And in this case, we have identified problems. And since education is the universal thing, there's even a document now by United Nations that they call Education Post 2015 that sets an agenda for countries across the world how education should go. And that document came by out of studies. It's a result of years of studies of the various countries that makes UNESCO. So that document, we do say that that document has, as part of its provisions, authors, or part of its of the panelists, people that were not in Nigeria, and so whatever recommendation they made for Nigeria will not take that? No. And in any case, some of those that participated in the workshops and conferences were Nigerians, scholars of international repute. Like I was saying, sir, access also has to do with the carrying capacity of the institutions. And those of us that are practicing have always argued that rather than create or establish more tertiary institutions, why don't government expand the carrying capacity of the existing ones? Why don't government invest strongly on infrastructure, make the infrastructure state of the art, let update the infrastructure, and then expand the carrying capacity so that we can take more students. That is what we're saying about that. And then talking about the other aspect of it, that is the dearth of personnel. I've often heard the NUC Executive Secretary say that the universities, as of today, need or require about 40,000 qualified academics.
Okay, let's take another call. This one is coming from Dr. Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim, where are you calling us from? Please indicate, tell us where you're calling us from. Go ahead and make your comment or ask a question. Dr. Ibrahim. Hello, Dr. Ibrahim.
I'm calling from Kogi State.
Where in Kogi State, Dr. Ibrahim?
The problem that the tertiary education system in Nigeria is facing, I want to say that it's mostly from the government. The government will not want to implement even the research work that have been that have been conducted regards to how the educational system of Nigeria will improve. They will never implement it. If you carry out the research, that research is thrown into the dustbin. That is one of the major reasons. So, and you know, in any educational system, is the welfare of those people that are the handlers are not taken care of. You will not go far. You can't go far. The government is insensitive to the welfare of the handlers of education in Nigeria. That is one of the problem that is building the educational system in Nigeria. And another thing that is very fundamental, even our secondary education is nothing to write home. Imagine a student that will come from secondary school with all excellent results. If you test him, even he has passed the exam, if you test him in the class, that person cannot even write ABC. He cannot pass a simple examination. So until the primary and secondary level of education is fixed, there is nothing you can get right in the tertiary institution. So we have that problem. Until government is ready and they wake up to tackle the issue of education. And you know, this issue of education is the one that is even causing insecurity in the country. The money they are voting for security in Nigeria, if they vote that half of that money into the educational system, you will discover that the trend of insecurity will go back in no future time. So it is the government. We have not gotten a government that has the will to headlong tackle the issue of education in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim called from Kogi State, and he has highlighted a number of issues. First is the fact that he says that the problems in the tertiary sector dovetail into what obtains at the primary and secondary levels. And from there, they seem to accumulate at the tertiary level. And then there's the issue of welfare, which we have talked about before now. And then he mentioned very importantly, research findings that are churned out by scholars in these institutions that are not being implemented by government or indeed even by the private sector. Because you know that in other developed climes, it is research from institutions, educational institutions such as we have in Nigeria, that have made those countries what they are in terms of technological development. Yes. So why is it that...
I wouldn't know the extent of his exposure. Because I say this because I am privileged to have been in a committee that assesses some of these, that's involved in assessing proposals. And that committee is called the National Research Fund Screening and Monitoring Committee. In my capacity as president of the Academic Staff Union of College of Education, that's why I'm there. And of course, we have our representative also from the Polytechnic universities. This is a committee made up of university proven academics from the university. And I dare say that they have made proposals that are far-reaching. And it's the kind of cutting-edge proposals that we have. Some bordering on science. In fact, the entire theme is on the fields, on the various fields. Humanities, arts and social sciences, what we call cross-cutting. Cross-cutting has to do with something that is quasi-science, quasi-art, and social sciences. It's not science, it's neither science nor humanities. Then we have sciences and we have... So there are proposed, as I speak, quite a number of professors are executing one research or the other. And I do know that already there's the arrangement is on ground by TED Fund towards getting the industry and the institutions collaboration in place so that the findings of all these projects that are ongoing will be used, will be whatever findings they have, whatever project they come up with, will be produced and then and utilized. Okay. What I seem to understand from what he's saying,
Dr. Ogirima, let's take another call, then we can take all of the issues together. Barnabas, Barnabas again is calling from Kogi State. Hello, Barnabas. Hello, Barnabas. Can you hear us? Well, we hope that Barnabas gets online again to speak with us. Please proceed.
So most of those recommendations have been that have been found worthy have been sponsored, and
by
then, of
who?
course, by TED Fund.
By TED Fund. Okay.
Yes, there is a unit that is handling that, and it's called the committee, and the committee is chaired by Professor Bamiru, and a one-time VC of University of Ibadan. And I let me quickly disclose to you that a lot of them, and that has been on for about 4 or 5 years now, and I think to a greater extent, some of those researches are nearing completion. That's about that. I think what he was saying is service delivery.
Is it only government? Our government agencies that should be dealing with some of this.
That is the big question for now.
The private
sector ought to be part of it.
Yes.
Exactly, sir. The private sector ought to be part of it. But you know, in our own case, it is government, and we have always looked onto government to doing everything that we think is necessary. Whereas even out there, we're not defending government. I'm a union person, but the truth be told, out there we have lots of investment in education. So many foundations by individuals, private individuals. Okay. And then, of course, in Nigeria, we have very few of them. So what I understand by what he said relative to his service, his curriculum delivery.
We'll come back to curriculum delivery. Let's cross over now to Cross River State, where Dr. Chris. Dr. Chris, please tell us your full names and go ahead and make your contribution. Hello, Dr. Chris.
What I want to make is that, okay, this is Dr. Christopher Chinasa calling from Cross River State.
Okay.
What I want to say is that the major problem in tertiary education in Nigeria is not just the government alone to be blamed. The problem lies with the university too, like the appointment of the VC.
I'm coming to it.
The appointment of the VC alone is also peculiar to the government and the school. In those days, I remember when I was a child growing up, the VCs, someone from Ekiti State can be a VC in an Imo State University or in Futo. And you saw that there was an improvement in the infrastructure of the building in terms of academic. People have the mindset to teach. People have the desire to work, are being employed. But now, because someone is from your state, the governor or the politicians appoint you to become the VC, and you do whatever you like. So nobody invests in infrastructure like we are saying that the government are not putting money. What about the money that is being generated within the school? What is it used for? So those are the questions we should ask. The money being generated in university, what is it used for? If the university system, there is no light. We have professors who are doing research on that basis. What are they contributing? We say research. We write papers to publish online. What have we done with what we have found out? We are academicians. We went to school to the extent to improve the life of the people who are coming before, who are coming after us. So the most important challenge is the appointment of the management of the schools. The management of the schools are not being appointed in the right direction. I remember, like I said earlier, if a Yoruba man is going to be the VC of the federal university in Futo, you see there are going to be an improvement. Everybody will work. Because if it doesn't work very well, the people, the community, the citizens of that particular state will ask them. And that will make him to put his efforts in order to make sure that his administration improve the standards of education in that particular state. And because we are one Nigeria, we can move forward in that regard. And that has been the major problem in the university system. People who are qualified are not given employment because they are not from the state. Very soon, Nigeria is turning to the state where you go into invest. If you are not from that particular state, you can't work.
All right. Dr. Chris, thank you so much. Yes. Okay, so university or tertiary administration, as it were, administration in the tertiary institution.
I do agree to a certain extent. Yes, to a certain extent. If I have it as a point here, but I didn't actually have it the way he put it. I put it as governance. You see, let's take, it's not just the management. I quite agree with him to a certain extent anyway, because that policy was actually a policy of government. A policy of government to appoint heads of tertiary institutions from the proximate state, proximate state, or maybe I would say proximate local government. That's what actually the government document is saying. I know. I'm privy to that. There's a document particularly instructing that the Federal Ministry of Education appoints from. But
irrespective of the fact that you may have somebody who is much
more qualified. Yes, it's actually a
from anywhere else
from
anywhere else. Country.
So, yes. But what I have here, well, I would rather put it this way: that there is a governance challenge in the entire tertiary education. It's not just headship of tertiary institutions. And what do I mean by that? You find a situation where it's over-politicized. Leadership or the managers of the systems, whether university, polytechnics or college of education, are over-politicized. But to a greater extent, that of the universities have been able to extricate themselves from this clutch of government. Government initially, you will recall, said you have 3 people that you recommend when there's a transition and a VC is exiting office. You recommend people after all the process may have been concluded. From there, government picks one. ASU has been able to fight that now. Through their struggle, that is no longer the case. So most of it is from there. But you still have a check somewhere in form of a governing council. Hitherto, you have a governing council populated by politicians, some of whom may not have gone through the 4 walls of the institutions. Tell me, what kind of contribution do you expect from them? Again, ASU has been able to overcome that challenge. But as I speak, that of the colleges and polytechnics is still the same thing. We have more of their number in our councils than you have from within. We have only 2 members in the same council. Tell me, where votes are required, who will take the day? That is we say it should be democratized. But we're not saying that the governance itself should be politicized to such an extent as to have intruders or people who do not have the requisite qualification populating our councils. And that is why whenever we have, that is why, let me say, summarize it by saying that is why we have had these issues lingering on, and councils will do nothing about it.
Okay. Now, Dr. Christopher also raised the issue of the resources that are generated within the tertiary institutions.
Fine. But
what are they used for?
You see,
now, in the past, when institutions of higher institutions are established, it's expected that they bring certain benefits to the communities, to the environment in which they were established. Now, but these days, that doesn't seem to be the case. How much are these institutions affecting their immediate communities and environments? What do they do with the resources that they have?
In various ways. But since we're in this context, we're talking about the resources being generated. Because in various ways, because there's still the cooperation between the town and gown in other aspects, community services that they request of management and they give, and a lot of others. But in this context, have we asked ourselves, individuals, let me draw an analogy here. We have been complaining about the cost of power. Have we asked ourselves, have we taken pain to find out what it costs these universities to sustain the power generation, the cost of diesel, the epileptic power situation of the country, costs universities and tertiary institutions, college of education, inclusive polytech, cost them enormous amount of money.
All right.
Besides,
Dr. Ogirima, yes, I'll come back to that. Somebody's been waiting on the line. He's calling in from Ondo State in southwest Nigeria. Onoriode, hello. Onoriode.
Hello,
Good afternoon. Yes, please go ahead.
How are you today, sir?
We're fine, and you?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Can I make a contribution, sir?
Please go ahead and make your contribution.
I would just want to thank you for setting up this program and thank the speaker. Appreciate his contribution so far. I want to say that the last class said, if those who the pedagogy are ignorant of education, what will be the state of what they are doing? In other words, if those who set up the governing council of universities are ignorant of the structure, the work, and the implication of what they do to the university, what will be the state of the university? Just like what the speaker said, the governing council of each of the universities are appointees by government, and the political appointees. Now they come in, they bring in their own policies based on their own political affiliation. They don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the interest, they don't even have the future, they don't think the future of the institution. So what would they do? Nothing. So you see that right from the primary school to the secondary school to the university, look at the shade. If the governing council, those who run the institution, they don't even have the knowledge, the wherewithal to run it, and they're running the system, where are we going to? Nowhere.
Okay.
We continue like this, we go married for year to year, we go nowhere. Gentlemen, I believe that the system knows what is happening. Nobody has the willpower, the political willpower to change it.
So, Honorable, what do you suggest should be the way forward?
Education. We are where we are because of the level of education we have.
All right, Honorable, what do you then suggest should be the way forward? We need a way forward.
Hello?
Well, with you, Honorable, I'm asking you, what do you suggest should be the way forward?
The way forward, like Minister said, there should be an urgent declaration of emergency education.
Okay.
There should be an urgent state of emergency for education in Nigeria. I graduated at the University of Benin. I went accounting. That took in the 90s. We have a premonition that we invested in a standard place where moral, proper institution is being injected into the human. Only for us to come to the university, by the time you start reading, you realize even the lecturers, they are even the problem to the university system. They corrupt the good mind. So what we need to do is to get to the emergency in education in Nigeria.
All right.
Otherwise, we go nowhere in the summer.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Thank you for your contribution. Honorable says there should be an immediate declaration of a state of emergency in the sector, and we can take it up from there.
In fact, at the retreat, the ministerial retreat actually came up with that a provision. It was collectively agreed that there should be a state of emergency. And like I said, as far back as 2017, but up till this moment, have they garnered the willpower towards declaring the state of emergency in the education sector? Because this, what a state of emergency will entail is bypassing protocol in totality and then doing it in a different way. And that is why I continually question the fact that a government that prides itself on change ought to have been doing things differently. But is this government seen to be doing that? They declared that state of emergency. It was declared clearly. It was stated. It's still there in the document. It's in the communique. And everybody agreed that given that, in fact, the quantum of money required on the funding, they agreed that there are funding issues. And they said it's about 16 trillion for the entire education sector for there to be development,
to revamp
it,
the sector.
everything about it, 16 trillion. But at the end of the day, has the state of emergency declared? No. Has any effort been made towards getting the funds that's so required? No. And all these things boil down to the willpower. Well, you see, if we commend the administration on the issue of the thrust of on three things: anti-corruption, economy, and security. But education has been left. There's nothing. We never even thought that education should be given. No, education should be a continual thing. Attention of government ought to be continually on education if you want to really be among the Committee of Developed Nations. Because as the popular adage says, there's no country that can develop beyond the level of its education. So with all these, with the gamut of challenges, with the myriad of problems that we have, unattended, unaddressed, where do we hope to be?
So what you want to see as we expect a new administration to be inaugurated on May 29 is a clear-cut declaration of state of emergency in the education sector so that...
For a start.
Yes, for a start.
For a start, yes.
So we can take it up from there.
Yes, for a start.
Right. Thank you so much. Well, Dr. NUHU Ogirima is the national president, Colleges of Education Academic Staff Union, COEASU. Unfortunately, Peter Adeyemi, who is the vice president of the NLC and general secretary of the Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Associated Institutions, has not been able to join us. But of course, you back home and in your offices has been able to join us today in looking at the challenges facing the tertiary education sector in Nigeria. And we've made quite a number of proposals that the incoming government should be able to take up and demonstrate the political willpower to implement all the documents that Dr. Ogirima has been talking about that have been on the shelves, gathering dust somewhere, somehow, and ensuring that when implemented, our educational system, especially tertiary education, is placed in a better place than where it is at the moment. Dr. Ogirima, thank you so much for joining us.